Marcus Rothwell checked his watch again as he walked through the large hall of the Metropolitan Museum. Another charity event, another night of fake smiles and business talk disguised as philanthropy. At 34, he had become one of the youngest tech billionaires in America. His company, Future Tech, had revolutionized how people used artificial intelligence in their daily lives. Tonight, like most nights, Marcus felt empty despite being surrounded by hundreds of wealthy and important people. He nodded politely at familiar faces while sipping his champagne. These events were all the same, people wanting something from him, whether it was money or connections. "Excuse me, you're blocking the painting," a firm voice said behind him. Marcus turned around, ready to offer a quick apology before moving on. But the words caught in his throat when he saw her. The woman stood confidently in a simple but elegant dark blue dress, her natural hair styled in an intricate updo that framed her face perfectly. "I'm sorry," Marcus finally said, stepping aside. "I didn't realize I was in the way." "No problem," she replied, her attention already focused on the artwork. She studied it with such interest that Marcus found himself curious about what she saw in it. "What do you think of it?" he asked. She glanced at him with slight surprise, as if not expecting him to still be there. "I think it shows how people can find beauty even in dark times," she answered thoughtfully. The artist created this during a very difficult period in her life. Marcus looked at the painting with new eyes. "I never thought about it that way. Most people don't take the time to look beyond the surface," she said, then extended her hand. "I'm Amara Johnson." "Marcus Rothwell," he replied, shaking her hand. There was no flash of recognition in her eyes, no sudden change in her demeanor when she heard his name. This was refreshing and unusual for him. "Nice to meet you, Marcus. Are you interested in art, or just here for the free champagne?" Her smile was teasing but kind. "Honestly, probably the champagne," he admitted with a laugh, "but I'm finding the art more interesting by the minute." They walked together through the gallery, and Marcus learned that Dr. Amara Johnson was a neurosurgeon who had won several awards for her humanitarian work. She spoke passionately about her recent medical mission to Ghana and her research on brain trauma treatment. "What about you?" she asked as they reached the end of the gallery. "What do you do when you're not attending charity events?" "I run a tech company," he said simply, curious if she would ask which one. Instead, she asked, "Do you enjoy it? Does your work make you happy?" The question caught him off guard. No one had asked him that in years. "Sometimes," he answered honestly. "But lately, I've been wondering if there's more to life than just work." Amara smiled, and Marcus felt something shift inside him. "There always is," she said. "The trick is finding it." When the evening ended, Marcus surprised himself by asking for her number. Even more surprising was that she gave it to him, but with a warning. "I should tell you, I'm very busy and very picky about who I spend my time with," Amara said. Marcus nodded. "I'd still like to see you again, maybe dinner next week." "We'll see," she said with a smile that lingered in his mind long after they parted ways. That night, for the first time in years, Marcus went to bed thinking about someone other than himself or his company. Something about Dr. Amara Johnson had caught his attention in a way no one else had before. 3 months after their first meeting, Marcus Rothwell found himself sitting in the hospital cafeteria, waiting for Amara to finish her rounds. It had become their routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he would bring lunch, and they would steal 30 minutes together during her busy day. "Sorry I'm late," Amara said, rushing to the table. Her doctor's coat was wrinkled, and her hair was pulled back in a practical bun. Even tired, she looked beautiful to him. "No problem, I brought your favorite," Marcus said, pushing forward a container of homemade jollof rice. He had asked his chef to learn how to make it after Amara mentioned missing her mother's recipe. "You're spoiling me," she smiled, taking a grateful bite. "This is exactly what I needed after that surgery." Marcus watched her eat, still amazed that she had agreed to a second date after their first meeting, let alone a third and fourth. Their relationship had grown slowly but steadily over these months. "How's your day been?" she asked between bites. "I fired someone today," Marcus admitted. "An executive who wanted to sell user data behind my back." Amara nodded seriously. "That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't. But you were right about setting clear boundaries with my team about ethics." He reached for her hand across the table. "You make me want to be better." The truth was, Amara had been changing him in small but important ways. Before meeting her, Marcus had lived in a bubble of yes men and luxury. Amara challenged him, questioned his ideas, and wasn't impressed by his wealth. On their third date, she had taken him to volunteer at a community clinic in her old neighborhood. He had spent the day moving boxes and setting up equipment instead of attending a VIP business dinner. It had been one of the most fulfilling evenings of his life. "My mother wants to meet you," Amara said suddenly, looking slightly nervous. "She's coming to town next weekend." Marcus felt his heart beat faster. Meeting her family was a big step. "I'd love to meet her." "She's not going to be impressed by your fancy car or your company," Amara warned. "Just so you know." Marcus laughed. "Like mother, like daughter. Don't worry, I'll leave the helicopter at home." The joke made Amara smile, but her eyes remained serious. "This is important to me, Marcus. My family is everything." "I understand," he said, squeezing her hand. "I want her to like me because I care about you." He had almost said love, but stopped himself. It felt too soon, too intense. Yet he knew it was true. Somewhere between their museum meeting and today, he had fallen in love with this remarkable woman who saved lives with her skilled hands and viewed the world with such compassion and wisdom. Later that evening, Marcus sat in his penthouse, looking out at the city lights. His phone buzzed with a message from Amara. "Just finished my shift. Thinking of you. Good night." Such a simple text, but it made his heart swell. Before Amara, women had wanted his money, his connections, his lifestyle. Amara wanted none of that. She had her own successful career, her own friends, her own life. She chose to spend time with him because she genuinely enjoyed his company. For the first time in his life, Marcus was in a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine connection, not on what he could provide or what he represented. As he replied to her message, Marcus realized something important. He was happier in these past 3 months with Amara than he had been in all his years of building his fortune. Money had brought him power and comfort, but it had never brought him joy like this. The billionaire who had everything was finally learning what really mattered. 6 months into their relationship, cracks began to show. Marcus sat in his office at midnight, surrounded by screens filled with data and projections. His company was launching a new product next week, and everything needed to be perfect. His phone buzzed again. Amara had called 3 times and sent 5 messages. He glanced at the latest one. "Marcus, please call me back. The ceremony starts in 30 minutes. I'm saving you a seat." He frowned, trying to remember what ceremony she meant. Then it hit him. Tonight was the Medical Excellence Awards. Amara was receiving the Breakthrough Research Award for her work on affordable neural implants for paralysis patients. She had been talking about it for weeks. "Damn it," Marcus muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. He had promised to be there. He had even bought a new suit for the occasion. He glanced at his computer screen. The product launch data showed concerning security flaws. If he left now, who would fix this? "Mr. Rothwell, the development team needs your approval on the final patch," his assistant said through the intercom. Marcus looked at his phone again, then at his computer. He made his choice. "Tell them I'll be right there," he said, then typed a quick message to Amara. "I'm so sorry. Can't make it. Critical issue at work. I'll make it up to you." 3 hours later, Marcus finally left his office. The problem was fixed, and the launch was back on track. He felt a mix of satisfaction and guilt as he headed home. Amara would understand once he explained how important this was, he told himself. When he reached his penthouse, he asked his assistant to order a diamond necklace to be delivered to Amara tomorrow. That would make up for missing her big night. The next morning, Marcus woke to find Amara sitting in his living room. Her face was calm, but her eyes were cold. "Nice of you to finally wake up," she said. "I've been waiting for an hour." Marcus ran a hand through his messy hair. "Amara, I'm really sorry about last night. We had a major security breach and—" "Stop," she said, raising her hand. "I don't want to hear about your work emergency. This is the 3rd important event of mine you've missed in 2 months." "I know, and I feel terrible," Marcus said, sitting beside her. "I got you something to make up for it." He reached for a small gift box on the coffee table, but Amara shook her head. "Do you really think a gift fixes this? That you can just buy your way out of disappointing me?" Marcus felt defensive. "I'm trying to show you I'm sorry. What more do you want? I want you to be present. Amara stood up, her voice rising. Not just physically, but emotionally. Last night was one of the biggest moments of my career, and you couldn't spare 2 hours. That's not fair, Marcus argued. My company employs thousands of people. Sometimes my work has to come first. It always comes first, Marcus. Always. Amara's voice softened with sadness. When was the last time you really listened to me? When we talked about my work, my dreams, my concerns without you checking your phone every 5 minutes. Marcus opened his mouth to argue but stopped. He couldn't remember. I thought you were different, Amara continued. I thought beneath all the money and power was a man who valued connection over control. I was wrong. She picked up her purse. I can't do this anymore. I need someone who sees me as a priority, not an option. Amara, please. Marcus stood, suddenly realizing how serious this was. I love you. She paused at the door, pain clear in her eyes. No, Marcus. You love the idea of me. You love having me when it's convenient. That's not real love. With those words, she walked out, leaving Marcus standing alone in his expensive, empty penthouse. The diamond necklace arrived an hour later. Marcus stared at it, finally understanding that some things couldn't be fixed with money. 2 weeks after Amara walked out of his life, Marcus still hadn't left his penthouse except for work. His days fell into a grim pattern. Wake up, check his phone for messages from Amara. There were none. Work for 14 hours, then drink expensive whiskey while staring at the city lights. Will you be dining alone again tonight, Mr. Rothwell? Asked Rosa, his housekeeper of 15 years, as she collected the breakfast dishes he had barely touched. I'm not hungry, Marcus replied, his eyes fixed on his laptop screen. Rosa sighed and put down her tray. Forgive me for speaking out of turn, sir, but this has gone on long enough. You look terrible. Marcus glanced up, surprised by her directness. In 15 years, Rosa had never spoken to him this way. I'm fine, he said automatically. No, you are not fine, Rosa insisted, her Dominican accent growing stronger with emotion. You don't eat, you don't sleep, you just work and drink. This is not living. What do you suggest I do? Marcus snapped. She won't answer my calls. I've sent flowers, gifts. More things. Rosa interrupted, shaking her head. Always things with you rich people. Did you ever think that maybe Dr. Johnson doesn't want more things? Marcus fell silent. He hadn't thought of it that way. 20 years I've worked for wealthy people, Rosa continued, her voice softening. Many of them lonely, just like you. All that money, and for what? To die alone surrounded by stuff. Her words hit Marcus like a punch to the stomach. He thought of his father, who had died exactly that way, wealthy, powerful, and completely alone. What happened with you and Dr. Johnson? Rosa asked gently. To his own surprise, Marcus found himself telling Rosa everything, how he had consistently put work before Amara, how he had missed her award ceremony, how he had tried to fix it with diamonds. When he finished, Rosa nodded knowingly. My husband was like you when we first married. Always working, thinking he was doing it for us. One day I packed my bags and told him I was leaving. What happened? Marcus asked. He had to decide what was really important, Rosa said simply. He chose me and our family. But first, he had to understand why he was always running to work instead of facing his feelings. After Rosa left, Marcus sat for hours thinking about her words. Why was he always choosing work? The answer came slowly but clearly. Work was safe. Work couldn't reject him. Work couldn't leave him like his mother had when he was 8. Work couldn't die suddenly like his father had. For the first time, Marcus saw how he had been using his wealth and work as shields against real emotional connection. Every time Amara had tried to get close, he had retreated to the safety of his office. Every time she had been vulnerable with him, he had bought her gifts instead of opening up himself. He thought about all the times Amara had asked about his childhood, his fears, his dreams beyond business. Each time, he had given superficial answers, changing the subject back to safer topics. That night, Marcus pulled out a photo of Amara from his wallet. It was taken during their weekend trip to the coast. She was laughing, hair blowing in the wind, looking directly at the camera, at him. That had been one of the few weekends he had turned off his phone completely. I'm sorry, he whispered to the photo. I didn't know how to love you properly. In that moment, Marcus understood that if he ever wanted another chance with Amara, or any real connection in his life, he needed to change from the inside. Not for her, but for himself. He picked up his phone and did something he had never done before. He searched for therapists near me and made an appointment for the next day. It was time to face the emptiness that all his billions could never fill. "So, Mr. Rothwell, why are you here today?" Dr. Paddle asked, her kind eyes studying Marcus from across her modest office. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in the chair. This was his third therapy session, and he still felt strange sitting in this normal office with its simple furniture instead of the luxury he was used to. "I lost someone important to me," Marcus said, "and I want to understand why." Over the next hour, Marcus talked about his childhood, something he rarely discussed with anyone. His mother leaving when he was 8, his father burying himself in work afterward, the boarding schools where he learned that achievement brought attention, if not love. "It sounds like you learned early that emotional connections are unreliable," Dr. Patel observed, "while success and work were things you could control." Marcus nodded slowly. "I never thought about it that way." For the next 6 weeks, Marcus committed to therapy twice a week. He began examining patterns in his life that he had never noticed before. How he always kept people at a distance. How he used his wealth to solve problems instead of addressing the real issues. How he feared vulnerability more than business failure. But Marcus didn't stop at therapy. He made other changes too. He started volunteering at the hospital where Amara worked, careful to choose days and departments where he wouldn't run into her. He wanted to understand her world better. At first, the nurses and staff were suspicious of the billionaire mopping floors and delivering supplies. But as weeks passed, they began to accept his presence. "Why do you keep coming back?" asked Jacob, an elderly volunteer who worked alongside Marcus every Wednesday. "Most rich folks show up once for a photo op, then disappear." "I'm trying to learn something," Marcus replied honestly, "about what matters." At work, Marcus made changes too. He established clear boundaries around his time. He delegated more to his capable team. He stopped expecting employees to answer emails at midnight. "Are you feeling all right, sir?" his assistant asked after Marcus left the office at 6 p.m. 3 days in a row. "Actually, yes," Marcus replied with a smile. "I think I'm finally feeling all right." One evening, while leaving the hospital after volunteering, Marcus saw Amara in the parking lot. His heart raced as she approached her car. He ducked behind a column, not ready to face her yet. But watching her from a distance, tired after what was surely a long day of saving lives, Marcus felt a wave of pride and longing. She was truly extraordinary. Marcus also began reconnecting with old friends, real friends from before his wealth, people who knew him when he had nothing. One night, having dinner with his college roommate Tom, Marcus surprised himself by opening up about Amara. "I really messed up," he admitted. "I had this amazing woman, and I was too scared to be vulnerable with her." Tom studied him. The Marcus I knew in college would never admit being scared of anything. "You've changed." "Is that good?" Marcus asked. "It's real," Tom replied, "and real is always better than perfect." 3 months after losing Amara, Marcus realized he was changing not just to win her back, but because he wanted to be better. He was sleeping better, laughing more, connecting with people in ways he never had before. One morning, after a therapy session where he had made a breakthrough about his fear of abandonment, Marcus sat in his car thinking about Amara. He missed her still, with an ache that hadn't diminished. But now he understood what she had been trying to tell him all along. Love wasn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was about showing up, day after day. It was about being present, not just physically but emotionally. It was about making someone a priority. Marcus knew what he needed to do next. Not to win Amara back, though he hoped for that, but to show her the respect she deserved. He needed to apologize properly. Marcus sat at his desk, staring at the blank paper before him. He had written and discarded 5 letters already. Nothing seemed right. How could he put into words the changes he had gone through? How could he apologize without seeming like he expected forgiveness? After another hour, he began writing from the heart. "Dear Amara, I'm not writing to ask for another chance. I'm writing because you deserve a proper apology. You were right about everything. I put work before you. I used money to avoid real connection. I was afraid to be vulnerable. He finished the letter, reading it over twice before sealing it. This wasn't about winning her back. This was about acknowledging the truth. The next day, Marcus called Dr. Wilson, the head of neurosurgery at Amara's hospital. "I'd like to make a donation," Marcus explained, but anonymously. "That's generous, Mr. Rothwell, but may I ask why the anonymity?" Dr. Wilson asked. "Because it's not about recognition," Marcus replied. "It's about supporting important work." 2 weeks later, Amara's research program received a $5 million anonymous donation, specifically for her work developing affordable neural implants for patients in underserved communities. Marcus made sure his name appeared nowhere in the paperwork. But Marcus didn't stop there. He remembered how Amara had once mentioned her hometown, where many talented students couldn't afford medical school. Marcus established a foundation providing full scholarships for medical students from that community, naming it after Amara's grandmother, who had inspired her to become a doctor. When a local newspaper wanted to interview him about the foundation, Marcus declined. "This isn't about me," he told his PR team. "Make sure the focus stays on the students and the community." One evening, Marcus received a call from Rosa, his housekeeper. "Mr. Rothwell, I hope you don't mind me saying, but I heard about your scholarship foundation," she said. "My nephew lives in that town. He wants to be a doctor but couldn't afford it. Now he has hope." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest that no business success had ever given him. "That's wonderful, Rosa. I hope he applies." Despite his attempts at anonymity, news of Marcus's charitable works began spreading. Business magazines noted the change in his company's culture. Hospital staff whispered about the billionaire who mopped floors and delivered supplies without complaint. After sending his letter, Marcus didn't contact Amara directly. He wanted to give her space, but he continued volunteering at the hospital, even after glimpsing her in hallways a few times. They never spoke, but he felt her presence like a magnet. 4 months after their breakup, Marcus received an unexpected email from Amara. "I got your letter, and I've heard about the other things too. Would you be willing to meet for coffee?" Marcus read the email 10 times, his heart pounding. He replied simply, "Name the time and place, I'll be there." The night before their meeting, Marcus couldn't sleep. He stood on his penthouse balcony, looking out at the city lights. 6 months ago, he had been a different man, successful but empty, wealthy but alone. Now he understood what Amara had tried to tell him all along. Real connection required risk. Real love demanded vulnerability. He didn't know if Amara would give him another chance. Perhaps too much damage had been done. But Marcus realized something important. Even if she didn't come back to him, he was grateful for the changes she had inspired. He was becoming someone he could respect, someone who valued people over profits, connection over control. For the first time in his life, Marcus Rothwell was learning how to truly love, not just Amara, but himself too. Tomorrow's coffee meeting wasn't the end goal. It was just one step on a journey he was committed to continuing, with or without her. Marcus arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early. He chose a quiet table in the corner and ordered a black coffee that he barely touched. His stomach was in knots. After months of transformation and reflection, he would finally face Amara again. When she walked through the door, the world seemed to slow down. She wore simple jeans and a blue sweater, her hair in natural curls framing her face. Even dressed casually, she carried herself with the confidence that had first attracted him. Amara spotted him and walked over. Marcus stood, resisting the urge to hug her. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as they both sat down. "Thank you for your letter," Amara replied, studying his face. "You look different." Marcus smiled slightly. "I feel different." A barista came to take Amara's order, a chai latte, her favorite. Marcus remembered how she used to say it reminded her of her grandmother's tea. "So," Amara said after the barista left, "you've been busy? Medical scholarships, research funding, volunteer work." "You heard about all that?" Marcus asked, surprised. "It's a small hospital. People talk." Amara's expression remained neutral, especially when a billionaire starts mopping floors. "I wasn't doing it for attention," Marcus said quickly. "I know." Amara nodded. "If you were, your name would be on everything. But it's not." They sat in silence for a moment. Marcus noticed how she tapped her fingers on the table, a habit she had when thinking deeply. "Your letter?" Amara finally said, "Did you mean what you wrote?" "Every word," Marcus replied without hesitation. "I was wrong, Amara. I put work before you. I used my money to avoid real connection. I was afraid to be vulnerable. You deserved better." Amara took a sip of her chai, watching him over the rim of her cup. "And the changes you've made, are they just to win me back?" It was the question Marcus had been asking himself for months. "No," he answered honestly. "They started that way, maybe. But now, I'm doing these things because they make me better. Happier. More whole." He leaned forward slightly. "Meeting you changed me, Amara. Even if we never speak again after today, I'll always be grateful for that." Something softened in Amara's eyes. "Tell me about therapy," she said. For the next hour, they talked. Really talked. Marcus shared his realizations about his childhood, his fear of abandonment, his tendency to control everything around him. Amara listened, occasionally asking questions that showed she was truly hearing him. "I'm proud of you," she said when he finished. "Real change is hard." "What about you?" Marcus asked. "How have you been?" Amara told him about her work, her recent publication, her mother's health scare. Marcus listened attentively, not checking his phone once. "You really are different," Amara observed with slight wonder. The old Marcus would have checked his phone at least 10 times by now. The old Marcus was an idiot, he replied with a self-deprecating smile. Amara laughed, a sound Marcus had missed desperately. When their laughter faded, a comfortable silence fell between them. "I still have feelings for you," Marcus admitted quietly. "But that's not why I wanted to meet. I needed to apologize properly, face to face." Amara reached across the table and took his hand, the first physical contact they'd had in months. Her touch sent electricity through him. "I have feelings for you too," she said. "But Marcus, I can't jump back into what we had before. Too much happened." "I understand," Marcus nodded, though his heart raced with hope. "But," Amara continued, "I'd be open to starting again. Slowly, as friends first." Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "I'd like that." As they left the coffee shop, walking side by side but not touching, Marcus felt lighter than he had in months. This wasn't the romantic reunion he had once imagined. It was something more valuable, a second chance to build something real, with a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. "Same time next week?" Amara asked when they reached her car. "I'll be here," Marcus promised, and they both knew he meant it. 1 year after their coffee shop reunion, Marcus stood nervously in the crowded hospital auditorium. Today was the grand opening of the Johnson Rothwell Neurological Center, a state-of-the-art facility that would provide cutting-edge treatment to patients regardless of their ability to pay. The project had begun as a collaboration between Marcus and Amara 6 months after they started rebuilding their relationship. What began as weekly coffee meetings had slowly evolved into dinners, long walks, and deep conversations about their hopes and fears. "You look nervous," said Tom, Marcus's old college roommate, who stood beside him. "Is it that obvious?" Marcus adjusted his tie for the 10th time. "Only to someone who's known you for 20 years. Tom laughed. "Relax. Today is a good day." Marcus nodded, scanning the crowd for Amara. She was across the room, stunning in a red dress, talking with her mother and Dr. Wilson. When she caught his eye, she smiled warmly, and Marcus felt the same flutter in his chest that he felt the first time they met. The journey back to each other had not been easy. There had been difficult conversations, moments of doubt, and old patterns that needed breaking. But they had faced each challenge together with honesty and patience. "Ladies and gentlemen," the hospital director announced, "please welcome Dr. Amara Johnson and Mr. Marcus Rothwell to the stage." As they walked to the podium together, Marcus remembered how different his life had been just 1 year ago, how empty his success had felt without someone to share it with, how meaningless his wealth had been when used only for himself. Amara spoke first, explaining the center's mission and thanking the staff who would make it possible. Then she turned to Marcus with pride in her eyes. "And now, the man whose vision and partnership made this center a reality, Marcus Rothwell." Marcus stepped forward, looking out at the audience. In the past, he would have given a rehearsed speech about innovation and excellence. Today, he spoke from the heart. "This center represents what's possible when we put people before profit, connection before control," he said. 1 year ago, I was a different man. I thought success meant having the biggest company or the most money. I was wrong. He glanced at Amara, who nodded encouragingly. The most valuable thing in my life isn't in my bank account. It's the relationships I built, the people who challenge me to be better. His voice softened. Especially one remarkable doctor who had the courage to walk away when I wasn't showing up properly, and the grace to give me a second chance when I finally understood what matters. After the ceremony, Marcus and Amara welcomed guests and gave tours of the new facility. They moved through the crowd together, their hands occasionally touching, their smiles genuine. Your speech was beautiful, Amara's mother told Marcus when they had a quiet moment. I wasn't sure about you at first, but you've proven me wrong. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson, Marcus replied sincerely. That means more than you know. Later that evening, Marcus and Amara walked along the river near his penthouse. The stars were bright above them, and a cool breeze carried the scent of spring flowers. We did it, Amara said, squeezing his hand. We did, Marcus agreed. Though it was mostly your brilliance. I just provided the money. Amara stopped walking and turned to face him. No, Marcus. You provided much more than money. You brought vision, commitment, and genuine care for the patients. Don't diminish your contribution. Marcus smiled, still getting used to accepting praise without deflection. We make a good team. We do, Amara agreed, stepping closer to him, in more ways than one. As they stood there under the stars, Marcus marveled at the journey they had taken. From that first meeting at the museum to today, opening a center that would help thousands. From a relationship built on surface attraction to one founded on mutual respect, honest communication, and shared purpose. I love you, Marcus said, the words coming easily now after months of saying them. I love you too, Amara replied, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Not because of what you have, but because of who you become. As they walked on, hand in hand, Marcus knew that the greatest achievement of his life wasn't his business empire or his billions. It was learning how to truly love and be loved in return.